Chapter 3. The Binding. That evening, Maelis found Rowan at the Laughing Goose, sitting alone at a corner table with a bowl of Marta's thick vegetable stew growing cold in front of him. He was reading a small leather journal, making notes in the margins with quick, precise movements. The common room was filling with the usual evening crowd, but they gave the stranger's table a wide berth, curiosity warring with the rural tendency to be suspicious of outsiders. Maelis sat down across from him, without invitation. He looked up, and she saw surprise flicker across his features before settling into something that might have been relief. "Tell me about the Emberwings," she said without preamble. "Everything you know. If I'm carrying one's essence, I need to understand what that means." Rowan closed his journal and leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Have you eaten? This is not a short tale, and Marta's stew is quite good when it's warm." As if summoned by her name, Marta appeared with another bowl and a heel of fresh bread. "There you are, dear. Heard you had quite the adventure with that dragon. Eat up, you look pale." She bustled away before Maelis could respond, already taking an order from a table of farmers. "She mothers everyone," Maelis explained, tearing the bread in half and offering part to Rowan. Her own children moved to the capital years ago, so now the whole village gets the benefit of her concern. "It's nice," Rowan said, accepting the bread. "I haven't had anyone fuss over me in a very long time." There was a story there, Maelis could tell, but she didn't press. Instead, she took a spoonful of stew and waited for him to begin. "The Emberwings," Rowan said, his voice taking on the cadence of someone who had spent a lot of time with dusty books and ancient texts, "were unique among dragonkind. While their cousins hoarded gold or knowledge or, in some cases, just enjoyed setting things on fire, the Emberwings devoted themselves to cultivation. They were gardeners on a massive scale." He pulled his journal toward him, flipping to a page covered in sketched diagrams. "Look here. This is from a text I found in the ruins of the Westdale archive. It shows the magical currents that flow through the world like underground rivers. The Emberwings could see these currents naturally and use their power to keep them flowing properly." Maelis studied the diagram, tracing the flowing lines with one finger. As she did, the ember in her chest pulsed, and for just a moment, she could have sworn she felt something similar running beneath the floor of the inn, deep in the earth. "What happens when the currents stop flowing?" "Death," Rowan said simply. "Not dramatic, not immediate, but inevitable. Plants stop growing, water sources dry up, the soil loses its ability to nurture life. And worse, the void creeps in. Think of the currents like an immune system for the world. When they weaken, the infection spreads. And the song of growing? That's where it gets complicated." Rowan took a sip from his mug, gathering his thoughts. "The song isn't actually a song, not in the way we understand music. It's more like, imagine if you could hear the harmony between all living things. The way a seed knows when to sprout, the way birds know when to migrate, the way the seasons turn. It's all part of one great pattern. The Emberwings could perceive that pattern, and more importantly, they could strengthen it when it weakened." He turned to another page in his journal, this one covered in what looked like musical notation but with symbols Maelis didn't recognize. "This is my attempt to transcribe what the old texts describe. The song exists on a frequency humans can't naturally perceive, but with the right training and focus, we can learn to sense it. And now, with an Emberwing's essence inside you, you should be able to not just sense it, but actually affect it." Maelis pushed her empty bowl aside and leaned closer to look at the strange notation. As she did, something odd happened. The symbols seemed to shift and dance on the page, rearranging themselves into patterns that almost made sense. She could hear something too, not with her ears, but with some deeper part of herself. a faint melody that felt like wind through leaves and water over stones. "You can see it," Rowan breathed, watching her face. "You can actually see the notation changing. That shouldn't be possible. It took me 3 years of study just to perceive the static form." "It's singing," Maelis said softly, still staring at the page. "Very quietly, but it's there, like the whole world is humming under its breath." Rowan reached across the table and gently closed the journal. "That's enough for now. Without proper preparation, listening too closely to the song can be overwhelming. Some scholars have been driven mad trying to comprehend its full complexity." Maelis blinked, coming back to herself. The common room of the inn seemed suddenly very loud and very normal after that glimpse of something greater. So the dragon, the Emberwing. It gave me the ability to hear and affect this song. "But you said I need training." "Desperately," Rowan confirmed. "Right now, you're like someone who's been handed a master craftsman's tools without knowing how to use them. You might create something beautiful by accident, or you might hurt yourself and others." "Others?" Maelis felt a chill run down her spine. "I could hurt people? The power of life and growth seems benign, but imagine if you couldn't control it. Imagine plants growing so fast they destroyed buildings, or the life force in someone's body accelerating beyond their control." He must have seen the horror on her face because he quickly added, "That's why I'm here. That's why you need to learn the incantations, the words of binding and focus that will help you channel the power safely." "Show me," Maelis said. "Something small, something safe. I need to understand what I'm dealing with." Rowan glanced around the crowded inn, then shook his head. "Not here. Too many people, too many variables. Tomorrow, at first light, meet me at the stone circle north of the village. It's an old place of power. The residual magic there will make it easier for you to feel the currents. I know the place. Children dare each other to spend the night there, saying it's haunted." "Not haunted," Rowan said with a slight smile. "Just remembering. Places of power have long memories." He paused, then added, "Bring the dragon dust. We might need it for the binding." "Binding?" "To create a safe channel for the power. Think of it like building banks for a river. Without them, the water goes everywhere, causes floods, destruction. But with proper channels, that same water can irrigate fields, turn mill wheels, sustain life." He stood, leaving coins on the table for the meal. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, your real education begins." After he retired to his room, Maelis remained at the table, watching the familiar faces of her neighbors as they talked and laughed and complained about the weather. Everything looked the same as it had a week ago, but she could feel the difference. There was a current running beneath it all, weak and stuttering like a stream in drought. But there, Hedda Weatherwain stopped by her table on the way out. "Heard you were talking with that mage fellow. Handsome enough under all that road dust, isn't he?" "Hedda," Maelis said, exasperated and amused in equal measure. "He's here about the dragon." "Of course he is, dear. Dragons and such. Very magical, very important." Hedda's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Still, no harm in noticing he has nice eyes, green like spring leaves, wouldn't you say?" Maelis hadn't noticed, actually. Or rather, she had noticed but hadn't admitted to herself that she'd noticed. "Good night, Hedda." "Good night, dear. Try to get some sleep. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." Hedda patted her shoulder and departed, leaving Maelis to wonder if the old woman knew more than she let on. That night, Maelis packed a small satchel with the things Rowan had requested: the vial of dragon dust, a fresh notebook for taking notes, a water flask. She added a few items of her own, her favorite binding needle, though she couldn't say why she thought she might need it, and the ancient book of dragon lore that had started all of this. She tried to sleep, but the ember pulsed with anticipation, sending warmth through her body in waves. Finally, she gave up and sat by her window, watching the stars and trying not to think about how her life was about to change irrevocably. Legend Interlude: The Tale of the First Partnership. In the days before memory, when the world was young and magic ran wild as wind, there lived a dragon whose scales held the colors of every growing thing: the green of new leaves, the gold of ripened grain, the rich brown of fertile earth. This dragon, who would become the first Emberwing, loved to watch the small creatures that had begun to walk upright and speak in symbols. The humans, for that's what they would come to call themselves, struggled in those early days. They had clever hands and clever minds, but they didn't understand the rhythms of the world. They planted seeds in winter and wondered why nothing grew. They settled by rivers that would dry up come summer, then had to move again. The dragon took pity on them. Or perhaps it wasn't pity so much as recognition. Here were creatures who could learn, who could become partners in the great work of tending the world. So the dragon came down from the high places and spoke to a woman who was trying to grow food in soil that had been drained of life. "Why do you plant in dead earth?" the dragon asked. The woman, whose name the stories have forgotten but whose courage they remember, didn't run. She looked at the dragon with eyes that held more curiosity than fear and said, "Because my children are hungry and I don't know what else to do." The dragon breathed upon the soil, not fire, but something gentler, older, more patient. The earth darkened, becoming rich and ready. "Plant now," the dragon said, "and I will teach you the signs to read. When the moon waxes, when the robins return, when the ice melts from the mountain peaks, all these things are part of one great song, and if you learn to hear it, you will never plant in dead earth again." The woman learned, and she taught others. The dragon taught too, showing them how to read the currents of magic that flowed beneath the surface of things. And in time, dragon and human created something new, a partnership where each contributed what the other lacked. The humans offered their creativity, their ability to imagine and plan and build. The dragons offered their deep connection to the living world, their ability to channel raw magic into usable form. Together, they maintained the balance that kept the world green and growing. But all partnerships can be broken, all trust can be betrayed. The void didn't come from outside, it came from within, from the hunger that grew in some hearts for power over rather than power with. And when the first human tried to steal a dragon's essence by force, rather than accepting it as a gift, the crack that would become the void was born. This is why the ember's gift could only be given freely, accepted freely. This is why Maelis's yes mattered so much. It was a return to the original partnership, a healing of an ancient wound. Though she didn't know it yet, she was about to become the bridge between what was lost and what could be again. Chapter 4: Reluctant Departure. The stone circle stood on a hill just north of Laura. 5 ancient pillars arranged in a perfect circle with a flat altar stone at the center. Frost covered the grass, and Maelis's breath misted in the pre-dawn air as she climbed the gentle slope. Rowan was already there, sitting cross-legged on the altar stone, with his staff across his knees, looking for all the world like he'd been carved from the morning mist. "You're early," he said without opening his eyes. "Couldn't sleep." Maelis set down her satchel and rubbed her arms for warmth, though the ember in her chest kept her from feeling truly cold. "This place always felt strange to me, even as a child, like it's waiting for something." "It is." Rowan opened his eyes and stood in one fluid motion. "It's been waiting for about 300 years, actually. This was a nexus point, a place where the Emberwings would come to renew the local currents. Feel here." He placed his hand on one of the standing stones and motioned for her to do the same. The moment Maelis's palm touched the cold stone, she gasped. It was like touching a living thing. She could feel its slow, deep pulse, the way it reached down into the earth and up toward the sky. But underneath that, ancient strength was something else. Hunger, need, a desperate thirst that made her heart ache. "It's dying," she whispered. "They all are." Rowan moved to stand beside her, his hand covering hers on the stone. Every nexus point, every place of power. They've been slowly starving without the Emberwings to feed them, but you can change that. Feel the ember in your chest. Feel how it responds to the stone's need. Maelis closed her eyes and focused inward. The ember pulsed, warm and eager, reaching out toward the stone like a friend greeting another after long separation. Without conscious thought, she let that warmth flow down her arm and into the ancient pillar. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The stone drank her warmth like parched earth drinks rain, pulling more and more until Maelis felt like she was pouring her very self into its endless need. Panic flared. She couldn't stop it, couldn't pull back. The stone would drain her dry, leave her empty as a shed snakeskin. "Maelis," Rowan's voice cut through her panic. "Listen to me. Don't fight it. Speak these words. I offer what I can spare. No less and no more. Let the giving be bounded by wisdom, not want." She repeated the words, her voice shaky but growing stronger with each syllable. The moment she finished, the pull gentled. The stone still drew from her, but now it was controlled, measured, like the difference between a flood and an irrigation channel. "That's an incantation of boundaries," Rowan explained, his hand still over hers, warm and steadying. "The first lesson any mage learns. Power without boundaries is chaos. You have to define the shape of your workings, or they'll take whatever shape the world imposes on them." Maelis opened her eyes and gasped again. The stone under her hand was changing. The grey granite was developing veins of gold that spread like living things across its surface. Tiny plants, moss and lichen, began to grow in the crevices, and she could have sworn she heard the stone singing, a deep thrumming note that resonated in her bones. "Look," Rowan said softly, and she turned to see the other stones beginning to respond. The gold veins were spreading to them too, carried through underground connections she could suddenly perceive. The whole circle was waking up, remembering what it was meant to be. In the center of the circle, the altar stone began to glow with soft white light. The frost on the grass melted in a perfect ring, and tiny flowers, spring flowers that shouldn't bloom for months, began to push through the soil. "This is what you can do," Rowan said, and there was awe in his voice. "This is the power of an Emberwing. You've just restored a nexus point that's been dead for 3 centuries. With training, you could restore them all." Maelis pulled her hand back from the stone, suddenly exhausted. The ember still pulsed in her chest, but it felt dimmer now, like a fire that had been banked. "That took a lot." "Too much." Rowan steadied her as she swayed slightly. "You're pouring power out without knowing how to replenish it. Here, sit." He guided her to the altar stone, which was warm now, almost alive under her hands. "The second lesson. You have to maintain the cycle. Power out, power in." The Emberwings drew from the sun, the soil, the growing things around them. They were part of the cycle, not separate from it. He sat across from her and pulled out his journal. "Close your eyes. Feel the warmth of the sun rising, even though it's barely dawn. Feel the life in the earth beneath us. The ember knows how to draw from these things. You just have to let it." Maelis did as instructed, and almost immediately she felt it. Tiny threads of warmth and life flowing into her from all directions. The grass, the stones, the air itself, all offering tiny portions of their essence. Not taking, she realized, but sharing. The way plants share nutrients through their root systems, The way a forest is actually one vast, connected organism. Better? Rowan asked after a few minutes. Much. She opened her eyes to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. This is going to take a lot of practice, isn't it? Years, typically. But we don't have years. He pulled out a map and spread it on the altar stone. Look here. I've been tracking the spread of the blight for the past 5 years. These dark areas are places where the void has taken hold completely. Nothing grows there anymore. And these? He pointed to areas shaded with lighter marks. These are failing, including here. His finger traced a circle around Laura and the surrounding countryside. Maelis could see her village at the center, looking terribly small and vulnerable. How long? She asked quietly. At the current rate, maybe 6 months before the blight reaches Laura proper. Less if it accelerates, which it has been doing. Every nexus point that fails makes the void stronger and the remaining defenses weaker. Maelis stared at the map, at all those dark spaces where life had been extinguished. So I have to leave. I have to go to these places, restore the nexus points, push back the blight. We have to, Rowan corrected. You have the power, but you need guidance. And more than that, you need protection. The void touched, humans who have given themselves to the hunger, they'll sense what you're doing. They'll come for you. Why? Maelis asked. Why would anyone choose the void? Rowan's expression darkened. Because the void offers power without price. Or so it seems at first. No boundaries, no balance, just taking whatever you want. By the time they realize the void is eating them from the inside out, it's too late. They become extensions of its hunger, seeking to devour everything that still holds life. A cold that had nothing to do with the morning air ran down Maelis's spine. And they killed the dragon, the Last Emberwing. They've been hunting dragons for centuries, stealing their power when they could, destroying them when they couldn't. But an Emberwing. He shook his head. An Emberwing's power can't be stolen. It can only be given. That must have frustrated them enormously. So now they'll hunt me. Yes. The simple acknowledgement hung between them for a moment. Then Maelis stood, brushing off her skirts with hands that only trembled a little. Then I suppose we should get moving. If I only have 6 months to learn how to save the world, we can't waste time sitting around. Rowan blinked, clearly surprised by her sudden determination. Just like that? You're ready to leave everything behind? Maelis looked back toward Laura, where smoke was beginning to rise from morning fires, where people she'd known all her life were starting their day. Not ready, she admitted. I don't think I'll ever be ready, but look at this place. She gestured to the circle of stones, now thrumming with renewed life. I did this. In a few minutes, with barely any training, I brought a dead place back to life. How can I know I have this power and not use it? She pulled the vial of dragon dust from her satchel, watching it catch the morning light. The dragon died to give me this chance. It would be cowardice to waste it, because I'm afraid. Fear isn't cowardice, Rowan said gently. Fear is wisdom. The brave person isn't the one who feels no fear. It's the one who feels it and acts anyway. Pretty words. Maelis carefully tucked the vial away. Are all mage-knights so philosophical? Occupational hazard. Spend enough time with ancient texts and you start sounding like one. He stood and began rolling up the map. If you're serious about this, we should leave today. The longer we stay in one place, the easier it is for the void touched to find us. Today? Maelis's determination wavered slightly. I need to make arrangements. My shop, my books. Can you trust anyone to look after them? She thought of Willem, steady and reliable. Of Hedda, nosy but good-hearted. Of Marta at the inn, who mothered everyone who stood still long enough. Yes, I can. Then we leave at sunset. That gives you the day to say goodbye. Rowan picked up his staff, and Maelis noticed the runes were glowing faintly, as if responding to the renewed power in the stone circle. I'll gather supplies. We'll need food for at least 2 weeks, camping gear, and anything you can't bear to leave behind that will fit in saddlebags. You have horses. Horse, singular. Thessaly is stabled at the inn. She's carried me for 5 years now, and she's got opinions about everything, but she's reliable. He paused at the edge of the circle. Maelis, are you sure? Once we leave, once you start using your power openly, there's no going back to the life you had. Maelis felt the ember pulse in her chest, warm and insistent. Already she could feel the threads of connection to the stone circle, to the growing things around her. She was changed, had been changed, from the moment the dragon pressed its snout to her chest. Going back was already impossible. I'm sure, she said, and meant it. The walk back to the village felt both too long and too short. Everything looked different now that she knew she was leaving. The bakery where she bought her morning bread, the well where the village women gathered to gossip, the ancient oak that served as a message board and meeting place, all of it seemed precious and fragile. She found Willem already at work in his smithy, the ring of hammer on anvil carrying through the morning air. He looked up when she approached, setting aside his work immediately. Maelis, you're up early. How's the roof repair holding up? Willem, I need to ask a favor. A big one. Something in her tone must have warned him because his expression grew serious. What's wrong? She told him everything. The dragon's gift, Rowan's explanations, the spreading blight, her need to leave. He listened without interrupting, his face cycling through disbelief, concern, and finally, a sort of resigned understanding. I always knew there was something different about you, he said finally. Even before the dragon, you had a way of making broken things whole again, not just books. Remember when little Sarah broke her doll and cried for 3 days? You fixed it, and she swore it was even better than before, that it felt more real somehow. Maelis remembered. She'd thought it was just her careful stitching, but now she wondered if even then, some spark of the ember's power had been waiting inside her. Will you look after my shop? She asked. The books especially. They're more than just objects. They're memories, stories, connections to the past. Of course. Willem pulled her into a rough hug that smelled of smoke and metal. You save the world, girl. I'll save your books. Seems a fair trade. She made similar arrangements with Hedda, who cried and tried to pack her entire pantry into a bag for the road, and with Marta, who simply nodded as if she'd expected this all along. That young mage has the look of destiny about him, Marta said sagely. And you've always been too bright for this little village. Go on then, go shine somewhere that needs the light. By afternoon, Maelis had packed everything she couldn't bear to leave. Her best bookbinding tools, several changes of clothes, the dragon law book, a journal for recording what she learned, and a small pressed flower that her mother had given her before she died. It all fit into 2 leather bags that had seen better days, but were still sturdy. She stood in her workshop one last time, running her hands over the familiar surfaces. The ember pulsed, and she could feel the memory of every book she'd repaired here, every story she'd helped preserve. The books seemed to pulse back, as if saying goodbye. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Rowan stood there with a pack on his back and leading a grey mare who did indeed look like she had opinions about everything. This is Thessaly, he said, and the horse snorted as if to say, obviously. She's agreed to carry you, but she wants you to know it's a favour, not an obligation. Maelis approached the horse carefully, holding out her hand. Thessaly sniffed it thoroughly, then pushed her nose into Maelis's palm with surprising gentleness. The ember warmed, and Thessaly's ears pricked forward with interest. She likes you, Rowan said, sounding surprised. She usually takes weeks to warm up to people. Animals have been acting strange around me since the dragon, Maelis admitted. Yesterday, a wild rabbit followed me home and tried to come inside. The Emberwings were friends to all living things. Animals would sense that connection in you. He helped her secure her bags to the saddle. Are you ready? Maelis looked back at her cottage one more time. The hole in the roof had been properly patched now, and someone, probably Hedda, had planted new flowers by the door. It looked like a place someone would come home to. Maybe someday she would. I'm ready, she said, and let Rowan help her mount Thessaly. As they rode out of Laura, half the village turned out to see them off. Children ran alongside for a while, and Maelis heard someone say, "There she goes, the dragon, touched bookbinder, off to save the world." It should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, it sounded like the beginning of a story. The sun was setting as they reached the crossroads at the edge of the valley. Rowan pulled out his map, studying it in the dying light. "We'll head east first, to the Silverleaf Grove. It's a 3-day ride, and there's a nexus point there that's barely holding on. If we can restore it, it will slow the Blight's advance from that direction." Maelis nodded, trying to look confident despite the way her stomach was tying itself in knots. The ember pulsed reassuringly, reminding her she wasn't alone in this. She carried the heart of a dragon, the last gift of a dying race. "Tell me about the incantations," she said as they rode into the gathering dark. "If I'm going to learn years of training in months, we might as well start now." Rowan smiled, and even in the twilight, she could see approval in his expression. "The first thing to understand is that words have power, but only when paired with intent. The incantation I taught you this morning, about boundaries, the words themselves are just a framework. What matters is the will behind them." He began to teach her as they rode, his voice mixing with the sound of hoofbeats and evening birdsong. Maelis listened and learned, the ember pulsing with each new concept. Behind them, the lights of Laura grew distant and then disappeared entirely. Ahead lay the unknown, danger and possibility in equal measure. But for now, in this moment between day and night, between her old life and her new one, Maelis felt something she hadn't expected. A hope. The world was dying, but it wasn't dead yet. And as long as the ember burned in her chest, as long as there were still places that remembered what green meant, there was a chance to heal what had been broken. She touched the vial of dragon dust in her pocket, feeling its warmth through the glass. "Thank you," she whispered to the dragon's memory. "I'll try to be worthy of your gift." The ember pulsed once, bright and warm, and Maelis could have sworn she heard an answer carried on the evening wind. "You already are." Dragon Dream Interlude. That night, camped beneath stars that seemed impossibly bright away from the village lights, Maelis dreamed again of flying. But this time was different. This time she wasn't seeing through a dragon's eyes, but flying alongside one. The Emberwing. Her Emberwing, she realized, the one who had died in her shop, soared beside her, whole and healthy and radiant with golden light. "You're afraid," the dragon said, without judgment. "Terrified," Maelis admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you careful, but don't let it keep you small." The dragon barrel rolled through a cloud, coming out the other side, covered in droplets that caught the dreamlight like diamonds. I was afraid too at the end. Afraid I wouldn't find someone in time. Afraid the gift would die with me. "Why me?" Maelis asked the question that had been haunting her since that night. "Why not you?" The dragon's mental voice held warm amusement. "You think heroes are supposed to be tall and strong and trained from birth? Some of the greatest changes in history came from people who just said yes when the moment came. Below them, the dream landscape spread out. Not the world as it was, but as it could be. Forests that sang with life, rivers that ran clear and laughing, fields of grain that rippled like golden seas. And threading through it all, visible to her dream sight, the currents of magic that connected everything to everything else. "This is what we're fighting for," the dragon said. "Not just survival, but life in all its messy, glorious, complicated beauty. The void offers simplicity, the simplicity of nothing. We offer complexity, growth, change. It's harder, but it's worth it." "I don't know if I'm strong enough," Maelis confessed. "You don't have to be. That's why you have help. The mage-knight, he's a good one. Wounded, but good. Trust him, and trust yourself. The ember wouldn't have taken to you if you weren't capable of carrying it." The dream began to fade, colors bleeding into the approaching dawn. But before it ended entirely, the dragon pressed its snout to a dream chest, right where the ember lived. "Remember," it said, "you're not carrying my power, you're carrying our power. Dragon and human merged into something new, something that hasn't existed since the first breaking. You're not just healing the world, you're healing the ancient wound between our kinds." Maelis woke with tears on her cheeks and the ember burning bright as a star in her chest. Across the dying fire, Rowan sat on watch, his profile outlined by the first light of dawn. When he noticed she was awake, he offered her a cup of something that steamed in the cool morning air. "Tea," he said. "Mint, I think, though my plant identification skills leave something to be desired." She accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "How long was I asleep?" "Most of the night. You were restless. Bad dreams?" "Not bad, just complicated." She took a sip of the tea. It was indeed mint, and surprisingly good. "The dragon spoke to me, the one that died. It said I'm not just carrying dragon power, but something new, a merger." Rowan's eyebrows rose. That makes sense. The theoretical texts suggested that dragon magic and human magic were once one system, artificially divided. If you're carrying both, unified. He trailed off, staring into the middle distance the way he did when thinking hard about something. "What?" "You might be able to do things neither dragons nor humans could do alone, bridge the gap that created the void in the first place." He looked at her with an expression that was equal parts excitement and concern. "We'll have to be even more careful. You're not just valuable to our side, you're potentially the key to everything." "No pressure," Maelis said dryly, and was rewarded with one of his rare, genuine smiles. "None at all. Just the fate of the world." He stood and began breaking camp with practiced efficiency. "But first, breakfast. Even world saviors need to eat." As they prepared for another day of travel, Maelis found herself thinking about the dragon's words. "Trust him," it had said about Rowan. "And trust yourself." The first part was becoming easier with each passing hour. Rowan was patient, knowledgeable, and surprisingly gentle for someone who called himself a knight. But trusting herself, that would take more time. Still, as she helped pack up the camp and prepare Thessaly for the day's ride, she felt the ember pulse with warm approval. She was on the right path, even if she couldn't see where it led. "Ready?" Rowan asked, offering her a hand up onto Thessaly's back. "As ready as I can be," she said, accepting his help. As they rode toward the rising sun and the distant shadow of the Silverleaf Grove, Maelis let herself imagine, just for a moment, that they might actually succeed, that the world might sing again, that the void might be pushed back, that the partnership between human and dragon might be reborn in a new form. It was a dream worth fighting for. It was a dream worth leaving everything behind for. And as the ember pulsed in time with Thessaly's steady gait, Maelis began to believe it might even be a dream worth dying for, if it came to that. But not today. Today was for learning, for traveling, for discovering what it meant to carry dragonfire in a human heart. Today was for beginning.